Okay, so what I also want you to think about as you consider what am I going to write about is the idea of an argument and how an argument is structured. Because writing a good thesis statement isn't just about making it sound like a thesis statement. It's about making a well-designed argument that's going to be provable in your paper, okay? Does anybody know the three main components of an argument? I can see at least two people that should know, and Autumn should have known too. And no, okay, that's all right. It's claim, data, and warrant. So any argument is going to have these three components in some way, shape, or form. So the claim is what you're saying is true. It's the thing you're trying to prove to somebody. Your data is the evidence you have to prove that that claim is true. And your warrant is the explanation of why that data is valid as a proof for your claim. Okay, because again, when you get to more complex arguments, this needs interpretation, right? If you're thinking in terms of science and somebody just gives you a spreadsheet of numbers and says, oh, this proves that if you only drink coffee instead of water, you'll live forever. I think people are going to have some questions, right? And they're going to need an explanation for why that data proves that claim, okay? When it comes to literature, you still need that explanation because people can interpret the same line of literature in different ways, and sometimes more than one of those ways is perfectly valid. My favorite example, if nothing else, just because I think it's funny, is from Twilight, okay? So if my claim is Edward is a great boyfriend, and my evidence for that is that he watches Bella sleep, we laughed, right? So some of you were like, that doesn't compute, right? Because what else could I use that same evidence to prove?
He's a bad creep.
That he's a creepy, stalker. That's right? So if the same evidence could prove two completely different claims, then you really need an explanation that connects your evidence with what you're trying to prove. Because let's say somebody's writing this paper. Let's say I'm writing this paper, and I write, Edward is a toxic, abusive partner to Bella. As evidence, he watches her sleep. Do you think Stephenie Meyer, author of Twilight, is going to be like, yes, good point? Of course not, because she wrote that scene to imply that he was a great boyfriend who just loved her so much he could watch her do nothing, or that he was protective. So if you're not seeing that evidence the same way as someone else, you need to explain it. And if you're writing a sufficiently complex and interesting claim, then it's going to require explanation. If everybody would understand without you explaining it, then your claim probably isn't interesting or complex enough yet. In terms of literature, the warrant really needs to be analysis, or we could say it's close reading. It's all those lit terms that we've talked about. It's all the things that you've learned up until now. It's how many times he says phony and in what situation. It's all the ways we read the text for its style and the construction as a way to prove our ideas about the text. The data itself is going to be your quotes, okay, your textual evidence. But you can't assume that pulling a quote from the book is enough to prove whatever you're saying. If it was, then you wouldn't need to write the paper, because everybody would read it and think the exact same thing that you do. You need to prove something that requires analysis, explanation, that warrant. Is this making sense? Are there any questions? Okay, cool. Evelyn, can you